All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89 Chapter 15 First Year Aftermath Summary in which Remus has a lot of very angsty feelings. Most of the Gryffindors hung around in the common room, gossiping and chattering, all wondering who could have done it. The marauders, usually keen to be at the center of any debate, all crept upstairs, pale-faced with guilt. Remus sat in his bed, staring at the floor. He had gone too far. He knew that. It had felt good for a little while, and nothing could convince him that Severus hadn't deserved it. But now James was looking at him oddly, and he knew that Dumbledore would find out somehow, if Lily didn't tell everyone as soon as she got back to the common room. "What happened?" James asked carefully. "Did you lose control of it? That was really strong magic." "It was amazing," Sirius said suddenly. "You'll think twice about crossing us again." "But, we didn't want to hurt him, did we?" James frowned. "He's fine. He was just pretending to get us in trouble." "Will we get in trouble?" Peter asked, wringing his hands. "We didn't all do it, did we? It was only—" Sirius slapped him around the back of his head. "You rat!" he said. "We are marauders, all for one and one for all." "Whatever that means," Peter murmured, rubbing his hand and going to sit on his own bed sulkily. "I did it. You lot shouldn't get in trouble," Remus said quietly, not looking up. "It was half my idea," Sirius said. "I did the research. Don't worry, Lupin. I bet you anything he's fine." "If he is," Remus said heavily, "then it's no thanks to me." He finally met James's eyes. They were deep brown and much more serious than usual. "I did mean to hurt him." James held his gaze and nodded slightly. There was a knock at the door, diffusing the tension. It was Frank Longbottom. "You four are to come to McGonagall's office now," he said gravely. They followed Frank down the stairs and through the common room, where everyone was staring at them. Remus looked at his feet the whole time, but he heard the chatter go quiet as they walked through. It didn't matter what happened next. Everyone knew they were responsible. McGonagall was not alone. Dumbledore stood by her desk, his hands folded in front of him. He smiled pleasantly at the four boys who stood in the line before him. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said. "Good evening, Headmaster," they all chanted back. "You may be interested to know that young Mr. Snape is quite well, though his pride has been rather wounded." They said nothing. Remus didn't look up. "He's said to think that you four had something to do with his misfortune," Dumbledore continued pleasantly, as if he was just passing the time of day. "Particularly you, Mr. Potter." James looked up, opened his mouth, then closed it again, and looked down. Remus couldn't bear it. He only had 3 friends in all the world, and he wasn't going to lose them now. He stepped forward. "It was me, sir. I did it. He said some stuff to me earlier, and I was pissed off with him. I wanted to teach him a lesson." He forced himself to look up into Dumbledore's pale blue eyes. The old man nodded, satisfied. "I see. You acted alone." "Yes." Remus pulled out his wand. "Look, I can prove it." "No need," Dumbledore said hurriedly. "I believe you, Mr. Lupin." "It wasn't just him, sir," Sirius burst out. "I looked up the spell. I learned how to do it too. It's just as my fault." "You mean you planned this, Black?" McGonagall said sharply. "You planned an attack on another pupil. 10 points from Gryffindor each." Sirius looked down again. "And detention for all of you. For a month," she continued. "I find it very hard to believe that Mr. Lupin here acted alone." All 4 of them hung their heads. "You may go, gentlemen," Dumbledore said quietly. "I have no doubt you will all take the time to apologize to Mrs. Snape, of course." Sirius made an indignant indignant noise, and James elbowed him roughly. They turned to leave. Mr. Lupin, just a moment. Remus froze. He should have known he wouldn't get away with that easily. He stood still as the others left the room, McGonagall following them out to make sure they didn't loiter outside. Once the closed door, a still silence fell. Dumbledore didn't speak immediately, and finally Remus raised his head to meet the headmaster's eyes. He didn't look angry or disappointed. He wore his usual pleasant expression, tinged with curiosity, perhaps. How have you been finding Hogwarts, Remus? That wasn't the question he was anticipating. Okay, I suppose. You seem to have no problem making friends. That wasn't a question at all, so he didn't answer it. He looked at his feet, then back up. Am I getting expelled? He asked. Dumbledore smiled. No, Remus. No one is getting expelled. I can see that you're sorry for what you've done. The thing that concerns me is how you did it. That was a very strong spell. I wouldn't have expected a first year to... You must have been very angry. Remus nodded. He didn't want to tell Dumbledore why, about the names Snape called him, or how he made him feel stupid and worthless and small. Passion is an important quality in a wizard, Remus, Dumbledore was saying. It directs our magic, strengthens it. But, as you learned today, if we do not exercise control, then we endanger everyone around us. He looked very serious. His eyes had lost their twinkle. I do not wish to frighten you, Remus. When we first met, I told you that I sympathized with you. The hand you have been dealt is not one I would wish on anyone. But you must be more careful. You are a gifted wizard. Do not waste it. Remus nodded, wanting more than anything for the conversation to be over. He'd rather have the cane than a lecture. The worst part was that Dumbledore was right. He had let his anger towards Severus influence the spell he used. He wasn't just used to having that kind of strength. I'm sorry, Professor, he said. Is Severus okay? Yes, he is perfectly fine. I think he was hoping that he would simply stop struggling, then whoever was casting the spell would stop. He'd been dried off and won't suffer any long-term effects. Oh, Remus nodded. Good. Now, Dumbledore smiled. Off you go. I've kept you long enough, and I have a feeling that Mr. Potter is waiting outside for you to tell him everything. Dumbledore had given him a lot to think about, and he had plenty of time to think. McGonagall was deadly serious about their detentions, and even went as far as to split the four of them up. Sirius was tasked with scrubbing cauldrons in the dungeons. Peter was polishing the trophies in the awards room, and James was reconfiguring every astronomy telescope in the tower. Remus was given the worst task of all, mucking out the owlery. Of course, not one of them were permitted to use their wands, and every night they had to begin all over again. Cruel and unusual it is what it is, Peter complained at the time of the first week as they fell into bed, filthy and exhausted. Don't know what you're moaning about, Sirius grumbled. I'd love to polish trophies. Who knows what I've caught scrubbing out crusty potions from the bottom of those bloody cauldrons. James just groaned, removing his glasses and rubbing his eyes. Remus didn't complain, because he didn't feel like he deserved it. He felt terrible for giving all of his friends into trouble, but even more terrible for what he'd done. This was only exasperated by the amount of reading he had been doing. Sirius' spell was difficult, less intuitive than the magic he was used to. Sirius was the first to admit it wasn't perfect. It wore off after an hour or so, and had to be repeated. Remus had just about mastered it enough to perform it alone, though it often took him a few goes before he got it right. The very first thing he had done was visit the library and borrowed a book from the magical creatures shelves. Every night, after they had done their homework and served their detentions, Remus would draw the curtains around his bed, light his wand, and read the same chapter over and over. There were entire books written on a particular problem, he had found, but he was terrified that someone would become suspicious if he started checking them all out. Plus, he wasn't sure he wanted to know anymore. The things he'd read so far were bad enough. He thought about the books almost constantly. In his lessons, at mealtimes, during detention, words like monstrous, deadly, and darkest creature of all flashed in his mind like neon signs. He'd known that he was dangerous, of course. He'd known that he was different. He hadn't known that he was hated. Hunted, even. Apparently his teeth were worth thousands in certain parts of Eastern Europe. His pelt was worth even more. There was there were legislative details too, things he didn't fully understand, but which sounded horrible. Employment laws and registries and travel restrictions. It seemed that even if he could read, that his job prospects might be no better in the wizarding world than they were in the Muggle. He also understood why Dumbledore had told him to be careful. It was clear now that if anyone at Hogwarts found out what Remus was, then he might be in real trouble. An expulsion would be the least of his concerns. Frustratingly, nothing he read was really relevant to his experiences. There was no account of a wizard actually living with the condition, how they had managed, what to expect, whether they had been able to hold down a job or even just avoid hurting others. He'd assumed it was normal that he could smell blood and hear heartbeats, but how could he know for sure? Was it normal that his magic was stronger when the moon was rising? Sometimes he thought he could feel the sheer power of it, fizzing in his veins like a potion, filling him up and spilling over, bursting from his fingertips. And then there was his temper. How much of that was him, and how much of it was the monster? He'd lie awake most nights, after reading spells had worn off, and he was too tired to cast again, but too restless to sleep. His mind whirred from worry and fear. How simple everything had seemed back at St. Edmund's. No magic, no homework, no agonizing moral dilemmas, and of course, no friends. If anything stopped Remus from just giving up, then it was that. It was Peter. It was James, who had this. It was James, who had an ego the size of a lake, but a heart to match it. Peter, who, yes, granted was weird and a bit clueless, actually had a wicked sense of humor and could be unfailingly generous. And of course, Sirius. Sirius could keep secrets, had a mean streak but never directed it at his friends, was the most gifted student in the year but spent all his time coming up with pranks instead. But hard to imagine. Remus wasn't going to give up any of that, not if he could help it. Even if he had to be the swattiest student in the school, if he had to force himself to read out every book, complete every assignment, follow every rule, he'd be so good they wouldn't know what hit them. So good that they'd have to make him a prefect. He'd do it all. if it meant staying at Hogwarts and keeping his friends. There was nobody to talk to about any of these things. Nobody who would understand, anyway. As far as Remus knew, only Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Madame Pomfrey knew about his condition. McGonagall was too severe to approach with questions like that. Remus still wasn't sure that Dumbledore was entirely sane, and anyway, he had no idea how to make an appointment with the head master. So it had to be Madame Pomfrey in the end. He waited until the next moon, which came at the end of January. It was a Sunday, so after dinner he separated himself from the marauders and headed to the hospital wing earlier than usual. Remus! The nurse smiled at him, surprised. I didn't expect you until nightfall. I wanted to ask you some stuff, he said shyly. Eyes darted around the room. There were a few students lying in beds, most of them sleeping. Fortunately, Madame Pomfrey was very discreet. Certainly. Shall we pop into my office? It was much nicer than any of the teachers' offices Remus had been in so far. The walls were lined with hundreds of neat and orderly bottles of potions and tonics. It was light and airy. She didn't have a desk, and instead of wooden seats, there were comfortable armchairs seated either side of a fireplace. How can I help you, dear? She asked, settling in gesturing that he sit down. Well, he swallowed, not sure how to begin. I had a few questions about my problem. She smiled at him kindly. Of course you do, Remus. That's perfectly natural. Is there something specific you would like to know? Yeah, I did a bit of reading. I know there isn't a cure or anything. Not yet, she said quickly. Advancements are being made all of the time. Oh, okay. But for now, I suppose I just want to know more about it. I don't remember anything when I wake up, just that I get really hungry. You'd like to know more about the transformation? No, not just that. Stuff like, does it change who I am the rest of the time? Does it make me... He looked down at his hands, at a loss. He wasn't sure he wanted to say, and there was a hard lump in his throat. Remus, Madame Pomfrey said, this is a condition you have. It isn't who you are. I get angry sometimes, he said, staring into the fire rather than looking her in the face. I get really, really angry. Everyone has emotions. They are perfectly natural. We just learn to control them over time. He nodded, taking this in. He couldn't tell her the rest. When I change, it gets worse. Harder. Yes, she replied solemnly. I did read that it gets worse with the onset of puberty. Oh, okay, Remus nodded. There was a long pause. How much worse? I cannot say. You really are the first of your kind that I have treated. Another silence. Remus felt no better than he had before, no less confused. Would you like to borrow that book I mentioned? He nodded, finally bringing himself to look up at her. Madame Pomfrey's book, Fur to Fangs, Caring for Magical Half-Humans, was moderately more helpful than some of the other Remus had read so far. There was still a lot he couldn't understand. Advanced healing magic and complicated potion recipes, more details on legislation, and even more terrifying, trials and persecutions. Conversely, there was a lot he already knew. He had been bitten, and mustn't be allowed to bite anyone else during a full moon. Silver hurts him, there was no cure. The book did indeed say that there was an onset of puberty. His transformations would increase in intensity, and that he would become more dangerous afterwards. It did not mention changes in abilities, magical or otherwise, and there was nothing solid referring to change his mood or temper. He didn't consider it particularly interesting or important to know that he had a short snout than real wolves, or that his tail tuft. He'd rather not think about having either. But he was curious to discover that he was only a threat to humans, particularly wizards. Apparently, other animals were in no danger of him. He amused himself thinking that Miss Norris was safe, at least. It did not go unnoticed that Remus has withdrawn from the marauders since the attack on Snape. "Where have you been?" they'd ask, every evening as they all dressed for bed. "Homework," he shrugged, or something. "Detention." Though he hadn't had another detention since the prank. The truth was, he was always as far away from other people as he could get. He deliberately tried to stay out of their room until it was time to sleep, and even avoided the common room, if he could help it. He felt that until he could control his magic, he'd better not get involved in any more of he'd better not get involved in any more of James and Sirius's schemes. And they were scheming. He knew that for sure. Sometimes at night, Remus could hear them sneaking into each other's beds, then whispering fervently before casting a silencing charm. Other times they crept out with Peter under the cloak. They always tried to wake Remus, but he ignored them. During the day he hid away in the back of the library, or else in one of his secret places. He'd found places all over the castle that were small enough to climb inside and go undiscovered for hours at a time. Windows that had been long bricked over, but retained high, broad ledges, small, empty chambers like priest holes, concealed behind tapestries. The fifth floor's girls' bathroom. There he could curl up and read for hours. Sometimes he actually did his homework. Other times he forced himself to research his condition. He had another reason to hide. Since the incident, Snape's hatred towards the marauders had intensified, and he went everywhere with Mulciber, using him as personal protection. If they crossed paths in the hallways, Remus always had to be ready with a shielding charm. Mulciber knew more hexes than Sirius and James combined. One afternoon, Remus was deep into a book on ancient battle magic. There was a chapter in it on the Ulfhana, Germanic wolf warriors who fought the Romans. He was sitting high up on his favorite He was sitting high up on his what does that say? He was sitting high up on his window ledge, and he couldn't be seen from the floor unless someone was really looking. He climbed up using a rope charm they had learned a few weeks ago. He was just about to climb down and go for dinner when he made a wrong move and knocked the heavy book off the ledge. He winced as it plummeted to the hard stone floor with a deafening thud. "Who's there?" a voice came, further up the corridor. He heard footsteps, and with a sinking feeling, Remus realized he knew who it was. "It's just a book," Mulciber said, sounding sullen. "Yes, but where did it come from?" Snape replied suspiciously. Mulciber huffed. "The library?" Snape muttered under his breath, sounding exasperated. Remus pressed so hard as he could against the stone wall. "Who's up there?" Snape called in his nasal, spiteful voice. Silence. "Homonum Revelio!" Remus felt an odd tugging sensation in his stomach, and before he knew it, was being pulled from the ledge by an unseen force. He yelped, scrambled for something to hold on to, and ended up dangling from the ledge by his fingertips. Snape and Mulciber were laughing below. "Well, well," Snape purred, "if it isn't Loony Lupin." We're your little friends, eh? Put you up there and forgotten about you? Piss off, Snape, Sirius Remus hissed, losing purchase on the stone, hoping he wouldn't break his ankle when he finally dropped. Igniscabum! Snape smirked, pointing his wand. A thin rope of fire shot towards Remus, forcing him to kick off the wall, landing on his back hard. He blinked, winded, but quickly climbed to his feet, withdrawing his own wand. Okay, he said, his back sore from the fall. You got me. Now go away. Why on earth would we do that? Severus replied, facing him off, raising his wand. Expelliarmus! Snape roared, beating him to it. He clutched Remus's wand, gleefully, then added, Gelsko! Remus felt his feet fuse to the ground, sticking him in place. He groaned. He was stuck now. It might be worth calling for help, but the corridor was a quiet one, and he didn't want to look like a coward. He stared at them both, defiantly, setting his jaw. Mulciber, Snape turned to his troll-like companion. Weren't you just saying the other day that you needed to practice a few more hexes? I feel like this might be the perfect opportunity. Mulciber grinned, licking his lips. He raised his own wand, not quite as elegantly as Severus, but with the same malicious intent. Lapdosis! Nothing happened for a moment, and Remus felt a surge of relief. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a cloud of tiny stones, like gravel, appeared floating in mid-air. It hovered between Remus and Mulciber for a few moments, before beginning to fly at Remus's face, like a swarm of angry bees. He immediately raised his arms to protect himself, but Severus was too quick. Icarus, he said, yawning as if bored. Immediately, Remus found himself bound tightly by rope. Now, hardly able to move at all, the stones kept pelting themselves at him, and all he could do was shut his eyes. He struggled, knowing that it wouldn't help, but needing to do something. He didn't want to cry, even when he felt a hot trickle of blood sliding down his temple. What's going on? Severus! A girl's voice came from the end of the hall. Finit and Cantum! Snape whispered, hurriedly. The stones stopped at once, the rope vanished, and Remus's legs came unstuck, all at once. He wobbled and staggered backwards, leaning against the wall. He looked up, in time to see Lily, his savior, hurrying towards them. She stopped when she saw Remus, who was quickly trying to wipe the blood from his face. She looked at Snape and frowned. What are you doing, Sev? Nothing. He looked at the ground, scuffing the toe of his shoe on the flagstones. Just chatting to Lupin? Weren't we, Mulciber? Mulciber shrugged, unconvincingly. Lily looked at Remus, who looked away, embarrassed. Bad enough to be caught by Severus. He didn't need her feeling sorry for him, too. He snatched his wand from Severus quickly, turned, and started walking away as fast as he could. Wait! Remus! Lily ran after him. He didn't stop for her, but she was quick on her feet and caught up to him. She was clutching his battle magic book in one arm and grabbed a hold of him with the other. Please, she huffed. He stopped, sighing heavily. He wanted his book back. What? He scowled. What were they doing to you? Sev won't tell me, and I know it was bad. It's fine. Remus shrugged, taking his book. You're bleeding. Leave off, Evans. Remus pushed her away, trying to leave again. She kept hurrying alongside him. I told him to stop picking on you. I don't know why he does it. I mean, you don't even go around with Potter and Black anymore. I told him that... Why would that matter? They're the ones that he really wants to annoy. If he knows that you've gotten sick of them too, then... Wait. Remus stopped still. Lily nearly collided into him. Are you saying that you would be okay with Mulciber and Snape was cursing James and Sirius instead of me? Well, Lily flushed. I mean, fair fight at least, and they do bring it on himself, acting the way they do. Remus felt even more uncomfortable now. She thought that James and Sirius had attacked Severus both times. She had no idea it was him at all. This confirmed one of his worst fears. Lily thought that Remus only hung out around James and Sirius because he was odd, and because they let him. Did everyone in the castle think he was as pathetic as Peter? You're wrong, Remus frowned. Now leave me alone, will you? I'm so sorry about all of the mistakes in this one. I don't know what was going on. My mouth got really dry for some reason, but I am still trying to figure out the accents. I'm so sorry if they're a little odd. I am trying to figure them out, but I think I'm gonna try and post a little more regularly now. The last couple weeks have been super busy. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I really hope I got that part where I'm giggling out. I love the James has an ego the size of a lake, but he has a heart to match it, and I'm pretty sure you can hear me smiling when he talks about Sirius, because I just think it's really cute. Big wolfstar fan over here. Don't get me wrong, I love Grant. If you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, trust. Hope I'm not spoiling anything, but I feel like a lot of people who read the podfics, and I mean, it's in the tags, so yeah. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you're having a good day, wherever you're listening from.